At his wedding party, a millionaire forced the waitress to play the piano to humiliate her in front of everyone. 1 minute later, when she started, everyone was left speechless upon hearing. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and crimson as the Whitmore-Lawson wedding unfolded at the prestigious Hawthorne Grand Hotel. Crystal chandeliers sparkled like frozen stars above a ballroom filled with the city's elite. CEOs, socialites, and influencers mingling in a world where appearances mattered more than substance. Logan Whitmore stood at the center of it all, a smirk curving his lips. Tall, impeccably dressed in a custom-made tuxedo, and radiating self-assurance, he surveyed the crowd as if the entire world was his playground. "Tonight is perfection," he declared to his groomsmen, "because naturally I don't settle for less." Beside him, Kimberly Lawson, his bride, adjusted the diamond bracelet on her wrist and smiled mechanically. Her hazel eyes scanned the guests, ensuring every influential name was present. Her marriage to Logan wasn't just about love, it was about merging two financial empires into one untouchable dynasty at the far end of the ballroom. Audrey Reynolds balanced a silver tray with practiced precision, dressed in a crisp white blouse and black skirt. She moved through the maze of silk dresses and tailored suits, trying to remain invisible. The scent of truffle hors d'oeuvres mingled with the floral arrangements, but Audrey hardly noticed. Her mind was elsewhere, on the unpaid hospital bills waiting at home, her mother's weakening health, and Ethan's school fees. Dreams of becoming a pianist once filled her heart, but reality had forced her to trade ivory keys for polished trays. "Careful," warned Carla, another waitress passing by. "These people eat mistakes for dessert." Audrey gave a tight nod. She knew that well. The Whitmores were a name synonymous with wealth and ruthlessness. The last thing she needed tonight was to draw their attention. Logan strolled toward the grand piano, running a finger across its polished surface. "A Steinway," he mused, then turned to his friends. "You know, art and talent are wasted on the mediocre. Talent requires refinement, breeding." His eyes landed on the staff, lingering on Audrey as if sensing her discomfort from across the room. "Logan, don't start," Kimberly murmured, tugging his arm. "It's our wedding night," he chuckled, but relented, for the moment meanwhile. Audrey released a breath and moved toward a nearby table. A guest gestured for more wine, and she carefully poured it. As she pulled the bottle back, a single drop of crimson Merlot splashed onto the pristine white linen. Audrey froze. The guest didn't notice, but Logan did. "Hey," his voice sliced through the ballroom's hum. "You, waitress." Audrey's stomach tightened, heads turned, the music faltered. "Yes, you," Logan confirmed, stalking toward her. His eyes gleamed with cruel amusement. "Care to explain this?" "Disaster. It's just a drop of wine, sir. I'll change the cloth immediately," Audrey stammered. He laughed softly, shaking his head. "A drop. No. It's evidence of incompetence. You're not even good at pouring wine, but..." He tapped the piano with a finger. "Perhaps you're better at entertaining. Since you've already disrupted the evening, why not make yourself useful?" Audrey's eyes widened. "Sir, I can't." His voice boomed louder. "Ladies and gentlemen, our waitress here claims she can't, or perhaps she won't. What do you say? Shall we give her a chance to redeem herself?" Nervous laughter spread through the crowd. Audrey's knees weakened. Her fingers trembled, remembering the countless nights practicing scales and melodies. But that was a lifetime ago now. She was nothing more than a server, a shadow in a glittering room. "Go on," Logan taunted. "Play for us, unless you'd rather clean tables the rest of your life." The guests watched with curiosity. Kimberly shifted uncomfortably. In the corner, a man with salt and pepper hair, Scott Harrington, leaned forward, intrigued. Audrey swallowed hard, the weight of humiliation pressed down on her chest. She wanted to disappear, but the alternative was worse, letting Logan win. She took a shaky step toward the piano. The crowd murmured, intrigued. Logan folded his arms, expecting a spectacle of failure. Audrey sat on the bench, the keys stretched before her like old friends she hadn't seen in years. She placed her fingers on the cool ivory. Her heart pounded. The first notes came out hesitant, broken, like a bird testing its wings after a long captivity. Someone chuckled. Logan smirked. Audrey closed her eyes, tuning out the room. She remembered her father's voice. Music is who you are, sweetheart, not what you do. She exhaled and tried again. The melody shifted. The hesitant notes gave way to a cascade of harmonies, soft at first, then rising, swirling through the air like autumn leaves caught in a breeze. Conversations died. Glasses paused midair. The laughter ceased. Audrey's hands danced across the keys with a grace that transcended time. The music wasn't perfect. It was raw, emotional, and profoundly human. It told a story of loss, resilience, and an unyielding spirit. Tears pricked her eyes as she hit the final chord. The resonance hung in the air, demanding acknowledgement. Silence followed. Then, a single clap. Another. Soon, the ballroom erupted in applause. Kimberly stood up, surprised. Scott Harrington, mouth agape, stood up. And Logan, the man who had expected to humiliate a young waitress, now found himself confronted with an undeniable truth. The power of genuine music had exposed his own mediocrity. Audrey stepped away from the piano, her hands still trembling. Her gaze met Logan's. This time, it was he who looked away. Audrey stood up from the piano bench, her legs shaky, her chest rising and falling with every uneven breath. The echoes of the final chord still hung in the air, mingling with the applause that felt surreal to her ears. She kept her gaze low, afraid to meet the eyes of the guests who moments before had ridiculed her. Her heart, however, beat with a different intensity now, not with fear, but with something she did not yet dare to name. Logan Whitmore remained motionless in the center of the hall. The arrogant smile had vanished. His blue eyes, once full of sadistic amusement, now reflected a growing irritation. He had orchestrated that situation to humiliate a simple waitress. And yet, there she was, the center of attention, applauded, admired. Scott Harrington set his champagne glass aside and approached the piano, his eyes fixed on Audrey. It was rare, after decades in the industry, to feel that shiver in front of pure talent. When he reached her, he extended his hand. "Miss..." His voice carried genuine curiosity. "Reynolds," she replied hesitantly. "Audrey Reynolds. Miss Reynolds, what you did just now was..." He shook his head, smiling. "Extraordinary. Where did you study?" "I never finished school. I had piano lessons when I was a child. But I had to stop. You were born for this." He pulled a golden card from the inner pocket of his jacket. "I would like to talk about your future. I am producing an international tour, and your presence on that stage would be a gift to the audience." Audrey took the card, her hand still trembling. His name was familiar. Harrington was one of the most influential music producers in the country. She looked at the gleaming piece of paper and then at the kind face before her. I don't know what to say. Just say you'll think about it." The murmuring around grew. The guests whispered. Intrigued by what they had just witnessed, Kimberly Lawson, still by the main table, adjusted her impeccable dress and cast an uncomfortable glance at Logan. The groom no longer seemed so confident. "Well," said Logan, approaching with a forced smile. "What an unexpected show, isn't it? Look at that. Our talented waitress is a rising star, who would have thought?" Harrington folded his arms. "Yes, who would have thought? What surprises me is that no one noticed before. She's good with tricks for sure," retorted Logan, his tone laced with venom. "But I doubt anyone of your origin can survive in the real world of music." Audrey felt the heat rising up her neck. She knew she should remain silent, but something inside her refused to accept the silent humiliation this time. "My origin does not define what I can achieve, Mr. Whitmore, just as your last name does not define your worth." The words escaped before she could control them. There was a collective sigh. Logan tensed his jaw. For a moment, she thought he was going to say something, but he only smiled, a cold smile that did not reach his eyes. "Be careful with your daring, Miss Reynolds," he said in a low tone. "The fall is always harder for those who believe they have climbed too high." He walked away. Pulling Kimberly by the arm, she resisted at first, then followed him reluctantly. The hall resumed its rhythm, but not as before. Now, everyone looked at Audrey, not with contempt, but with curiosity and admiration. Scott Harrington broke the silence. "Don't pay any attention to him. Logan Whitmore is just another man who thinks money buys talent." Audrey nodded. but the knot in her stomach remained. Hours later, the event ended. The tables were emptied, the champagne was finished, and the guests departed in their luxury cars. Audrey removed her apron and tucked the golden card into her pocket. Her hands still carried the sensation of the keys beneath her fingers. In the staff locker room, Carla waited for her with an incredulous smile. "My God, Audrey, that was insane. Did you see his face? Logan looked like he had swallowed a lemon." "I saw," Audrey replied, but her mind was far away. And that producer, Scott Harrington. This is like something out of a movie. Carla held her hands. "You have to accept it, my friend. This is your chance." Audrey did not answer. The fear weighed more than the excitement. Her mother still needed medical care. Ethan, her brother, still had school. Music was an old, almost forgotten dream. Could she really give up everything? When she stepped out into the parking lot, the cold night air made her shiver. She grabbed her cell phone and saw 2 missed calls from home. She dialed the number and waited. "Mom? Audrey, dear?" Maggie replied in a weak voice. "How was the event?" Audrey hesitated. "It was different, but I'm okay. You were always meant for great things." "My daughter." Her words warmed her heart. She hung up and looked again at the golden card. Perhaps, just perhaps, her mother was right. As Audrey boarded the bus to go home, Logan Whitmore, sitting in the back seat of a limousine, stared at his cell phone screen. There was something in that moment in the hall that would not leave him in peace. Her look, her sudden confidence, the way the audience applauded that stranger while he, the host, was ignored. "Find out everything about Audrey Reynolds," he ordered his assistant. "I want to know where she came from, what she's hiding, and how to destroy any opportunity she has." The assistant nodded. Logan leaned back in the seat and smiled. If she thought she would win this battle, she did not know who she was dealing with. Audrey woke to the soft hum of the city outside her window. The faint scent of lavender from her mother's bedside diffuser mingled with the aroma of coffee brewing in the tiny kitchen. She stretched, her muscles sore from the previous night's shift. The events of the wedding haunted her like fragments of a vivid dream. The piano keys beneath her fingertips, the applause, the sharp sting of Logan Whitmore's words, and, of course, the golden card that now lay on her nightstand. Scott Harrington. Her eyes lingered on the name. A producer of his caliber wouldn't offer a contract just to be polite, would he? But doubt crept in like a shadow. What if it was all a joke? What if he'd simply been caught in the moment, intoxicated by the atmosphere and the surprise of seeing a waitress who could play? "Morning, sis." Ethan's voice broke her thoughts. He stood in the doorway in his wrinkled pajamas, hair sticking up in every direction. At 14, he'd inherited their father's dark eyes and quiet determination. "Morning, bud." She forced a smile. "Coffee's ready." "Smells like it." He yawned and padded toward the kitchen. "You were amazing last night," she frowned. "You watched it." "Carla posted a video. It's all over social media." He turned back to her, eyes wide with excitement. "You have to see it." Audrey's stomach twisted. She reached for her phone, opened the app, and there it was. A grainy video of her sitting at the grand piano, hands moving across the keys with raw emotion. The caption read, "From Waitress to Wonder, who is the piano girl?" She scrolled through the comments. "Incredible talent," wrote one user. "I got chills listening to her." Another said, "Is this girl even real? Wow." And then, further down, "Just another nobody getting lucky." Whitmore was right. One-hit wonder, probably faked it. Her chest tightened. "Don't listen to the haters," Ethan said, reading her expression. "You were amazing, and Harrington offered you a contract. That's huge." She nodded, but said nothing. Her mother's voice called from the bedroom. "Mom." Audrey walked in and found Maggie propped up against her pillows. Her skin looked pale, the oxygen tank beside the bed hissing softly. "I saw the video too." Maggie smiled faintly. "You were breathtaking, sweetheart. It was just one performance. Doesn't matter, talent like yours. It shines." Maggie coughed, the sound rattling her fragile chest. "I know it scares you, but this is your chance." The weight of responsibility settled on Audrey's shoulders. Her mother's condition wasn't improving, and Ethan was still so young. How could she abandon them for a dream that might crumble the moment she stepped on stage again? She bent down and kissed her mother's forehead. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Maggie gave her a knowing look, but didn't press. Hours later, Audrey clocked in at the diner. The bell above the door chimed with each customer's entrance, the scent of bacon grease and syrup clinging to the air. She balanced plates, smiled at regulars, and tried to ignore the occasional whisper of recognition when someone noticed her. By noon, she was exhausted, while wiping down a counter. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Miss Reynolds. The voice was familiar. Yes. This is Scott Harrington. Her heart skipped. Oh, hi, hello, Mr. Harrington. Scott, please. He chuckled softly. I'm calling because I meant what I said last night. I want you in my program. We'll train, tour, and build your career. You have what it takes. Audrey gripped the rag tighter. I don't know if I'm ready. No one ever is. His tone softened. Think about it. I'll send over some preliminary details. Don't let fear make the decision for you. She hung up. Pulse racing. That evening, after putting Ethan to bed, she stepped onto the balcony. The city lights blurred beneath her gaze. Could she do this? Could she risk stability for the uncertainty of music? Behind her, the television flickered with the news. A segment caught her attention. The Whitmore-Lawson wedding. Beyond the glamour. The screen showed Logan shaking hands with business moguls. And then, the video of her performance played again. The reporter's voice said, while the newlyweds celebrated their union, an unexpected guest stole the spotlight. Audrey Reynolds, a waitress with surprising talent, wowed guests with an impromptu piano performance. The shot shifted to Logan, interviewed after the event. It was amusing, he said, lips curling into a smirk. But talent, let's be honest. Playing piano is one thing. Sustaining a career is another. The girl's a waitress for a reason. Audrey's stomach dropped. His words sliced through her insecurities like a hot blade. She clenched her fists. Staring at the screen, the man who forced her to play, who sought to humiliate her, was now publicly dismissing her talent as a fluke. Her phone buzzed again. Another notification from social media. Curiosity 1. She opened it. Shot piano girl trending. Millions of views. Her heart drummed in her chest. The camera zoomed in on Logan's arrogant expression, then back to the piano. His laughter echoed through the room, even as her music stood as evidence of her genius. A waitress, maybe, but a failure. No. She turned off the TV and walked to her bedroom. The golden card lay there, waiting. She picked it up and dialed. Scott, it's Audrey. Let's do it. Far across town, Logan Whitmore sat in his study, swirling bourbon in a crystal glass. His phone lit up with a notification. Piano girl. Millions impressed. But was it just a trick? He smirked. Let them talk, he murmured. She'll vanish as quickly as she appeared. But even as he said that, a persistent discomfort gnawed at him. Something told him that Audrey Reynolds would not disappear so easily. The following morning, Audrey sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror mounted on the wall. The golden card with Scott Harrington's name glimmered in her hand. The words she had spoken the night before echoed in her mind. Let's do it. She hadn't slept much after making that call. Doubt had crept in through the cracks of her resolve, whispering all the familiar insecurities she'd lived with for years. Who was she to step into a world of professionals? She was just a waitress. No degree, no connections, no polished resume. Just a girl who'd played piano once at a wedding filled with bored elites. Yet, deep down, something stirred. That night, when her fingers danced across the keys, she had felt a spark she hadn't known existed anymore. For the first time in years, she had been more than invisible. And Logan Whitmore's dismissive words, "The girl's a waitress for a reason," played over and over like a broken record. "Mom!" Audrey's voice cracked as she entered her mother's room. Maggie Reynolds was reclining on the bed, her face pale but illuminated by a gentle smile. "Good morning, sweetheart." Her voice was weak, but her eyes were warm. "You look like you've been fighting a war in your head." Audrey sat beside her and took her hand. "Scott Harrington called last night. I said yes." Maggie's eyes widened. "Oh, Audrey, I'm so proud of you." "I'm scared," Audrey admitted. I'm not some conservatory-trained pianist. I haven't performed in years." Maggie squeezed her hand. "But you've lived, Audrey. And music isn't about perfection. It's about heart. And yours has always spoken through the keys. Audrey smiled, but the tightness in her chest remained. That afternoon, she met Scott Harrington in his downtown office. The room exuded understated elegance, dark wood floors, shelves lined with framed records, and a grand piano in the corner. Scott greeted her with a firm handshake and a genuine smile. "I'm glad you called," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "I won't waste your time. What I saw the other night, that raw, emotional performance, is exactly what audiences crave. We can teach technique, polish presentation, but that soul, that can't be taught." Audrey shifted nervously in her chair. "But I don't have a formal education, no professional experience." "Neither did Aretha Franklin," Scott replied, with a reassuring smile. "Music isn't built solely in classrooms, it's built in life." He slid a contract across the desk. "This is for a 6-month mentorship program with some of the best instructors in the industry. We'll prepare you for an international tour, starting with a performance in New York." Audrey's hands trembled as she scanned the document. The numbers were staggering. The program included a modest monthly stipend, professional training, and a guaranteed slot on a world stage tour. "Why me?" she asked. "You must see dozens of talented musicians." Scott leaned forward, clasping his hands. "I've been in this business for 30 years. I've seen technical brilliance that left me cold. Your performance, it made me feel something." He tapped his chest. "That's what audiences want." Audrey bit her lip. The opportunity was beyond her wildest dreams, yet the thought of stepping into that world felt like stepping off a cliff. "I need to think about it," she said. Hesitantly, Scott nodded. "Take your time, but don't take too long. Talent like yours deserves a stage." When Audrey left the office, she walked aimlessly through the busy streets, trying to process the weight of that decision. Across town, Logan Whitmore sat in his office, scrolling through his phone. The video of Audrey's performance had garnered millions of views. The media had latched onto the story. From humble waitress to piano prodigy, the narrative irritated him. "She'll disappear soon," he muttered. But the gnawing unease persisted. He had seen the way people looked at her that night, like she mattered. And Logan hated when people who didn't belong dared to stand out. "Mr. Whitmore," said his assistant, entering the office. "We found something." Logan took his eyes off the screen. "Go on." "Her father, Richard Reynolds, died in an accident 8 years ago. Left behind a wife, 2 kids, some medical debts. The girl works double shifts to keep the family afloat. No major scandals." Logan tapped his fingers on the table. "What about her contract with Harrington?" "Not signed yet." Logan smiled. "Good, let's make sure she never does." The next morning, Audrey woke to Ethan shaking her shoulder. "Turn on the news," he said, his face pale. Audrey grabbed the remote. The image appeared immediately, a news anchor with a grave smile. New details have emerged about the so-called piano girl, Audrey Reynolds. Sources claim that her viral performance was a publicity stunt, orchestrated by music producer Scott Harrington to promote his upcoming tour. An anonymous insider revealed that Reynolds received extensive training beforehand, and that her waitress job was merely a ploy to generate sympathy. Audrey felt her heart sink. "That's not true," Ethan shouted. "Why are they saying that?" The phone rang. It was Scott. "Don't believe a word of it," he said. "I'll get my lawyers on this. We'll find the source." Audrey hung up and ran her hands over her face. Logan Whitmore, on the other side of the city, hung up his phone and reclined in his chair. The plan had been easier than he had imagined. "Checkmate, Miss Reynolds," he whispered to himself, but Audrey had no intention of giving up that easily. Audrey sat at the kitchen table, her phone still gripped tightly in her hand. The news anchor's words repeated in her mind like a broken record. A publicity stunt, a ploy for sympathy, an elaborate hoax. The accusations made her stomach churn. The video of her performance, once a source of pride and disbelief, was now tainted by suspicion. Across the table, Ethan paced back and forth, his jaw clenched. "This is crazy. How can they just say stuff like that without proof?" Audrey forced herself to breathe slowly. "Because someone gave them a story. And it's the kind of story people love." She rubbed her temples. "No one cares if it's true. They care that it sounds scandalous. Her mother, Maggie sat in her wheelchair by the window, her face drawn with concern. "Honey, you can fight this," she said softly. "The truth always comes out." Audrey gave a hollow laugh. "Does it? Because right now, the truth doesn't seem to matter." The phone vibrated again. "Scott Harrington." Audrey hesitated before answering. "Scott." "Audrey." His voice was calm but strained. "This story is spreading like wildfire. I've already released a statement denying everything, but it might get worse before it gets better." "Why would someone do this?" Audrey's voice cracked. "My guess, someone who doesn't want you to succeed." Scott paused. "Have you had problems with anyone recently?" Audrey closed her eyes. One face immediately came to mind: Logan Whitmore. The sneer, the calculated humiliation, the way his eyes gleamed as if he were playing a game only he knew the rules too. "Yeah," she whispered. "Logan Whitmore." "That makes sense," Scott said without surprise. "The man loves control, and you stole his spotlight, even if involuntarily. What do? We let the music speak for itself. There's a showcase tomorrow at the Grand Plaza. It's a private event, but there will be industry insiders there, people who actually understand talent." "Tomorrow?" Audrey's pulse quickened. "That's too soon." "Not for you," Scott said. "Play the piano like you did that night, and no rumor can stand against it." Audrey hung up and stared at the phone. The idea of performing again, so soon and under public scrutiny, made her chest tighten. Ethan sat across from her. "You're going to do it." "You?" "Right." She looked into his hopeful eyes. He was too young to realize how terrifying that prospect was. "I don't know, bud. If I screw up, people will just say the rumors were right. Then don't screw up," Ethan said, with a simplicity only a teenager could muster. The next 24 hours passed in a blur. Audrey barely ate, barely slept. Her mind was consumed with scales, chord progressions, and worst-case scenarios. When morning came, she dressed in the only semi-formal outfit she owned, a navy blouse and black slacks. The Grand Plaza was even more intimidating than she imagined. Marble floors, gold-trimmed columns, and an imposing stage framed by velvet curtains. As she approached the piano, she felt the weight of the attendees' gazes. Men in tailored suits and women in elegant dresses whispered behind manicured hands. She sat down, placing her fingers on the keys. The coldness of the ivory made her tremble. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Music isn't a performance. It's a conversation. Speak to them." Audrey inhaled deeply, her fingers pressed down, and a melody unfolded. Soft at first, like the cautious opening of a diary. Then, gradually, it grew bolder, weaving a story of hope fighting through despair. The room stilled, conversations halted, the music soared, and Audrey surrendered to it, forgetting her fears. When the last note faded, silence reigned. Her heart pounded. Then the applause came, hesitant at first, then growing. People stood, some wiped their eyes. Scott approached her on stage, eyes shining. "That," he said, "was unforgettable." Audrey smiled through the blur of unshed tears. Maybe, just maybe, she could do this. But when she checked her phone later, the first notification hit her like a punch. Donner piano girl hoax trending. The showcase had been live-streamed, and while some praised her performance, others claimed it was pre-recorded and that she was merely pretending to play. "Of course," Audrey muttered, scrolling through the comments. Some users shared supposed proof, like the angle of her hands or the suspicious perfection of the sound. A message from Scott appeared. "We're fighting it." "Stay strong!" Audrey wanted to scream. How could something so genuine be twisted so easily? That night, as she sat by the window, Ethan joined her. "Don't give up," he said. "I'm not sure if it's even my fight anymore," she admitted. "You're wrong," Ethan said. "It's yours because you earned it, and you can't let him win." She hugged her brother tightly. He was right. Logan Whitmore wanted her to give up, to retreat into the shadows. The next morning, she walked into the Harrington music studio. Scott was in the middle of a call but waved her in. "I want to go ahead with the contract," Audrey said. "I'm ready." Scott's smile was immediate. "I'll get the paperwork finalized today." But later that afternoon, as Audrey prepared to sign, Scott's assistant entered, pale and wide-eyed. "Mr. Harrington, we have a problem." She handed Scott a tablet. His eyes scanned the screen, his expression darkening. He turned it for Audrey to see. The headline read, "Contract Cancelled. Piano Girl Exposed as Fraud by Insider Source." Below it, Logan Whitmore's name appeared in bold letters. Audrey's hands turned to ice. The game had just escalated. Audrey's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the headline. The words blurred before her eyes, but the meaning was clear. Logan Whitmore had struck again. Scott read through the article, his jaw tightening. "This is bad," he muttered. He scrolled further, and Audrey leaned in, her heart pounding. A source close to the industry has revealed shocking details about Audrey Reynolds, the so-called piano girl, who captured public attention overnight, according to insider information. Reynolds fabricated her background as a struggling waitress to generate sympathy and was secretly trained by industry professionals long before her viral moment. Sources claim that her emotional performance at the Whitmore-Lawson wedding was nothing more than a calculated act orchestrated by Scott Harrington to create a new marketable star. Audrey felt sick. "This is a lie," Scott nodded. "Of course it is. But people don't care about the truth, Audrey. They care about a good scandal." She pressed her fingers against her temples, forcing herself to think. Who's the insider source? Scott exhaled sharply. "Whitmore, who else?" Audrey clenched her fists. "How does he have this much power? He has money, connections, and influence. That's all it takes." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "And the world just believes whatever he says." Scott hesitated before responding. "Not everyone, but enough people will." Her phone buzzed. Messages flooded in, some supportive, but most filled with doubt. "Guess you weren't that special after all." Another industry plant exposed. Knew it was too good to be true. Audrey locked the screen and swallowed against the lump in her throat. "What do we do?" Scott hesitated. "I can try to push back with an official statement, but this could make our sponsors nervous. If they think you're a liability, they'll pull out. So you're saying I might lose everything because of his lies?" Scott met her gaze, his silence louder than any confirmation. Audrey felt the room closing in around her. She had barely taken her first steps toward something real, and now it was slipping through her fingers. "I need to talk to him," she said suddenly. Scott's eyes widened. "Absolutely not. He's doing this because he thinks he can get away with it," Audrey snapped. "I won't just sit here and let him destroy my life." Scott ran a hand through his hair. "Audrey, you're playing his game now. You don't win against people like Logan Whitmore by charging at them head first." "Then how do I win?" she asked. Voice shaking, Scott hesitated. "We find a way to prove him wrong. Publicly." Audrey exhaled lentamente. "And if I can't?" Scott leaned back, studying her. "Then you have to ask yourself, how much are you willing to fight for this?" The weight of his words settled in her chest. She thought about her mother, her brother, thought about the years she had spent sacrificing everything to survive. And now, when she finally had a chance to chase something for herself, Logan Whitmore was trying to take it away. No, not without a fight. That evening, Audrey stood outside the Whitmore Enterprises building. The towering glass structure loomed over her, its reflection swallowing the fading sunlight. She tightened her coat around her and walked through the revolving doors, her pulse hammering in her ears. "Excuse me," she said to the receptionist. "I need to see Logan Whitmore." The woman barely glanced up from her screen. "Do you have an appointment?" "No." "But then I'm afraid Mr. Whitmore is unavailable." Audrey gritted her teeth. "Tell him it's Audrey Reynolds." The receptionist arched an eyebrow, but picked up the phone. A few murmured words later, she hung up and gave Audrey a skeptical look. "Mr. Whitmore will see you in his office." Audrey swallowed her nerves and stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, she steadied her breathing. When she entered his office, Logan was already waiting, lounging behind his oversized mahogany desk with a glass of whiskey in his hand. He smirked when he saw her. "Well, if it isn't the star of the moment," he drawled. "Come to thank me for all the publicity." Audrey clenched her fists at her sides. "Cut the act, Logan. We both know what you did." He took a slow sip of his drink, his gaze never leaving hers. "I have no idea what you're talking about. You fed that story to the press," she snapped. "You're trying to ruin me." Logan chuckled, setting his glass down. "Oh, Audrey, you give me too much credit." All I did was point out a few inconsistencies. People ran with it because deep down, they want to believe it. She stepped forward, leaning over his desk. Why, what do you get out of this? Logan studied her for a moment, then smirked. You embarrassed me. Audrey froze. That night, he continued, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. You were supposed to be humiliated, not me. Instead, you turned it around, and now everyone's looking at you like you're some prodigy while I'm reduced to a footnote in my own wedding. Audrey shook her head in disbelief. You're doing all this out of spite. Logan smirked. Call it what you want. But let's be honest, Audrey. You don't belong in my world. You were never supposed to. Her nails dug into her palms. You think you can control everything? That you can decide who deserves a chance and who doesn't? He leaned back, stretching his arms. And yet, here you are, begging me to stop. Audrey inhaled sharply. I didn't come here to beg. I came to tell you that you won't win. Logan's smile faltered just a fraction. Oh, you might have money, power, and all the connections in the world, she said, voice steady. But I have something you don't. Something you can't buy. Logan raised an eyebrow. And what's that? Audrey met his gaze, unwavering. Talent. For the first time, Logan's smirk disappeared entirely. You can keep spreading lies, but in the end, the truth always comes out. And when it does, people will see you for exactly what you are. Logan's jaw tightened. And what's that? Audrey gave him a small, knowing smile. A scared little boy who's afraid of losing control. She turned on her heel and walked out, leaving him staring after her as she stepped into the elevator. Her hands trembled, but not from fear, from determination. Because now, more than ever, she was ready to fight. And this time, she would win. Audrey sat in the back of the taxi, her mind racing as the city lights blurred past the window. The confrontation with Logan replayed in her head, the smug tilt of his mouth, the glint of satisfaction in his eyes when he admitted to planting the story. The audacity of it all left her reeling. He had manipulated the media with nothing more than his name and an anonymous insider source, and the world had believed him without question. Her phone buzzed. Scott's name appeared on the screen. She hesitated for a moment before answering. Hey, she said, voice strained. Audrey, I just got off the phone with the sponsors, Scott said, his tone cautious. They're concerned about the press. They want us to put the contract on hold until the rumors die down. Audrey's stomach dropped. On hold? For how long? They didn't say. Just indefinitely. The silence stretched. Audrey pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the taxi window. So, Logan wins, she said bitterly. Not necessarily, Scott said quickly. This kind of scandal burns hot but fades fast. We just need to weather the storm. Weather the storm, she repeated softly. And what am I supposed to do while we wait? Keep playing, keep practicing. The truth will surface eventually. She ended the call without responding. The taxi stopped in front of her apartment building. Audrey paid the driver and walked upstairs, her shoulders heavy with disappointment. Inside, Ethan was sprawled on the couch, his laptop open on his lap. When she closed the door behind her, he looked up, his face tense. Hey, he said. You okay? Not really. Audrey dropped her bag and flopped into the chair opposite him. Scott said the sponsors put my contract on hold. Too much bad press. Ethan's eyes darkened. Because of Whitmore. Yeah. He closed his laptop and sat up. So what do we do now? Audrey sighed. I don't know. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The ticking of the clock above the TV filled the silence. Then Ethan stood. Come with me. What? Come on. He grabbed his jacket. Just trust me. Against her better judgment, Audrey followed her brother down the street to the small community library they used to visit when they were kids. Ethan walked to one of the dusty computers in the corner and logged in. What's this about? She asked. We know Whitmore is behind all of this, right? Ethan said, typing furiously. But nobody will believe us without proof, so let's dig. Audrey shook her head. You think we're going to find evidence of his lies in a Google search? Maybe not, but Whitmore Enterprises is huge. If he has a pattern of this kind of thing, someone might have talked about it before. Ethan's determination was contagious. Audrey pulled up a chair beside him, and together, they started to search. Hours passed as they went through old articles, interviews, and obscure forums. Most of the news exalted the relentless success of Logan Whitmore. Strategic mergers, aggressive acquisitions, superficial philanthropy. "Wait," Ethan said suddenly, pointing at a post on a corporate whistleblowing forum. The title read, "Whitmore destroyed my career. Ask me how." Audrey's pulse quickened. "Open it." The post was from a woman named Clara Morgan, dated 2 years prior. It described how Logan Whitmore had defamed her consulting firm after she refused to manipulate a financial report for an acquisition. Clara wrote that Logan used his influence to spread rumors about fraud in the company, causing clients to break contracts she had sued, but the case mysteriously disappeared. Ethan copied the email attached to the post. "Do you think she'll respond?" Audrey asked. "Only one way to find out," Ethan said, opening his email account and typing quickly. Audrey returned home feeling a spark of hope. Perhaps they were not as defenseless as they thought. The next morning, while having coffee in the kitchen, the phone rang. The number was unknown. "Hello, is this Audrey Reynolds?" The female voice was cautious. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Clara Morgan. Your brother emailed me last night." Audrey sat down. "Thank you for calling. We read your post about what happened with Whitmore Enterprises." Clara sighed. "That was a dark chapter of my life. What exactly are you looking for?" "Proof," Audrey replied. "Logan Whitmore is doing to me what he did to you, spreading lies to destroy my career before it even begins." There was a long pause. "I still have some old files," Clara said finally. "Documents, emails. Nothing that won me the case, but enough to paint a picture, and if he's using the same tactics again, maybe together we can make people listen." Audrey felt her heart race. "When can we meet?" "Today, if you want." "Yes," Audrey said without hesitation. Today, hours later, Audrey and Ethan met Clara in a discreet cafe in downtown. The woman, about 40 years old, looked tired but determined. She brought a worn folder that she placed on the table. "Logan Whitmore plays dirty," Clara said, pushing the folder toward Audrey. "He uses his PR team like a weapon. Anonymous leaks, fabricated stories. These emails show conversations between his staff about planting false information against my company. They never admitted it publicly, but I kept copies." Audrey opened the folder and read the messages exchanged between the executives of Whitmore Enterprises. The patterns were clear. First discredit, then cast doubt, and finally destroy the target's reputation. "This is exactly what he's doing to me," Audrey murmured. Clara nodded. "Whitmore cannot stand being challenged." Ethan leaned forward. "So how do we stop him?" Clara gave a sad smile. "We need the media, but not the ones he controls. Independent journalists who aren't afraid to publish the truth." Audrey took a deep breath. Logan had power and influence. But perhaps with that evidence, they could turn the tables. "Let's do it," she said. That night, Audrey sent copies of the documents to a journalist known for exposing corporate corruption. In a few hours, the phone rang. "Mrs. Reynolds," the firm voice said, "I received the files, if this checks out. Whitmore's going to have a very bad week." Audrey hung up and looked at Ethan. "Game on," she whispered. And, miles away, Logan Whitmore savored a glass of whiskey, oblivious to the fact that, for the first time, control was slipping from his hands. Audrey sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open in front of her. The screen displayed the article headline in bold, black letters. "The Puppet Master Behind the Piano Girl Scandal. How Logan Whitmore Manipulates the Media for Personal Vendettas." The journalist, Maria Torres, had done her job with precision. The piece outlined the tactics Logan Whitmore had employed against Clara Morgan years before, connecting the dots to Audrey's case with uncanny clarity. Screenshots of internal emails provided by Clara were embedded throughout the text, showing how Logan's PR team had crafted narratives to destroy reputations. The article detailed the exact strategy he had used, planting anonymous tips, paying influencers to spread doubt, and discrediting the target's achievements. Audrey's name trended again, but this time alongside words like resilient, talented, and victim of corporate sabotage. "Looks like we hit him where it hurts," Ethan said, leaning over her shoulder. "Yeah," Audrey murmured. "But this isn't over," Ethan frowned. "Why not? The truth's out now," she sighed. Logan doesn't just give up, Ethan. He's built his whole life on winning. The vibration of her phone on the table interrupted the conversation. It was Scott. She answered on speaker. Audrey, did you see the article? Yeah. We just finished reading it. It's everywhere, Scott said, his voice almost breathless. Sponsors are calling back. The contract's back on the table. They want to schedule your first official performance. Audrey blinked. Wait, already? The story turned the public's perception completely. Now they see you as the underdog with extraordinary talent who stood up to a billionaire. They love it. She chewed her lip. I don't want my career to be defined by this feud. It won't, Scott assured her. But this gives you momentum. We need to move fast. There's a charity gala next week at the Metropolitan Arts Center. It's the perfect place to relaunch your name, the Metropolitan Arts Center. It was one of New York's most prestigious venues. The thought of stepping onto that stage made her stomach somersault, but there was also a spark of excitement. Okay, she said finally. Let's do it. When she hung up, Ethan punched the air. Yes, you're going to crush it. Audrey smiled faintly. But her mind was already racing through every possible scenario where this could go wrong. The week passed in a blur of rehearsals and interviews. Scott had arranged for her to practice on a Steinway grand piano, identical to the one she'd played at the wedding. The keys no longer felt like strangers under her fingertips. They were allies, responding to her emotions with uncanny accuracy. But the pressure was suffocating. Reporters camped outside her building. Paparazzi snapped pictures whenever she left the rehearsal studio, and online. The battle raged on. While many praised her perseverance, Logan's defenders claimed she was milking the scandal for fame. The night before the gala, Audrey lay awake in bed. The soft glow of the city lights cast patterns on the ceiling. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated before answering. Hello? Hello, Audrey? Came the voice she instantly recognized. Logan Whitmore. Her body tensed. What do you want? Logan chuckled softly. Quite the performance you're preparing. I hear tickets are selling fast. Why are you calling me? To remind you of something, he said. You're standing on a stage I built. My world, my rules, and you might have won a small battle with that article, but don't get comfortable. The spotlight is fickle. One mistake, one misnote, and they'll turn on you like wolves. Audrey's grip tightened on the phone. I'm not afraid of you, Logan. You should be, he said, his voice dropping to a cold whisper. Enjoy your moment tomorrow. It might be your last. The line went dead. Audrey sat frozen, heart racing. She wanted to believe his words were empty, but deep down, she knew Logan wasn't the kind of man who bluffed. The next evening, Audrey arrived at the Metropolitan Arts Center, dressed in a sleek midnight blue gown that Scott's team had picked for her. Backstage, her fingers tapped nervously on her thighs as she listened to the hum of the crowd beyond the curtain. You ready? Scott asked, coming to stand beside her. I think so, she said, though her stomach twisted with anxiety. Logan called me last night. Scott's expression darkened. What did he say? That this is his world, and that I'll fail. Scott laid a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Let him think that. When you walk out there and do what you do best, his power disappears. Audrey nodded, but her palms were clammy. The stage manager signaled it was time. She walked toward the piano, each step feeling heavier than the last. As the spotlight bathed her in light, the applause swelled, then faded into expectant silence. She sat, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands on the keys. The familiar coolness grounded her. The first notes resonated softly, like ripples on still water. Slowly, the melody unfolded, a piece she'd composed during sleepless nights, a musical narrative of her journey from obscurity to this moment. Halfway through, something changed. The piano emitted a dissonant, jarring sound. The audience murmured in confusion. Audrey's fingers faltered. She tried to continue, but the notes were all wrong. The panic hit like a sledgehammer. Her mind raced. Had she forgotten the piece? No. Something was wrong with the instrument. She glanced to the side of the stage and saw him, Logan Whitmore, standing just beyond the curtain, watching with a satisfied smile. Audrey's heart pounded in her chest. He had sabotaged the piano. Somehow, he had found a way. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. People exchanged confused glances. Audrey closed her eyes. The weight of humiliation threatened to crush her. This was what Logan wanted, for her to break under pressure, to crumble in the face of his power. But then she remembered something her father once told her. When the world tries to silence you, play louder. She exhaled slowly and shifted her fingers a few octaves higher. Bypassing the sabotaged keys, the melody returned, hesitant at first, then growing with a raw and indomitable force. The audience leaned forward, captivated by the emotional shift. The dissonance had been a disruption, but Audrey transformed it into a new, more poignant variation of the piece. When she struck the final chord, the hall erupted in applause. People stood, whistled, cheered. Audrey remained motionless for a moment, her shoulders trembling. Then, she raised her eyes and found Logan at the side of the stage. His smile had vanished. She gave him a small nod, a silent declaration. "I'm still here, and I'm just getting started." Audrey walked off the stage with her heart racing, her breath shallow, and her legs trembling beneath the elegant folds of her midnight blue gown. The roar of the audience's applause still echoed behind her, a distant hum competing with the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Her fingers, which had just defied sabotage and reclaimed the music, now trembled uncontrollably. Scott met her just beyond the curtain, his eyes wide with disbelief and pride. "That was unbelievable," he said, gripping her shoulders. "You turned a disaster into a masterpiece." Audrey exhaled shakily, glancing toward the piano. The memory of those discordant notes haunted her. "He did it, Scott. Logan tampered with the piano. I saw him watching from the wings." Scott's jaw tightened. "We'll get the technicians to check it. If there's evidence, we'll go public." Audrey wiped a hand across her forehead. "He won't stop. He wants me to break." "Well," Scott said, giving her shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "He underestimated you tonight." The applause continued beyond the curtains, the audience still on their feet. For a moment, Audrey allowed herself a sliver of pride. Despite the sabotage, she'd adapted, improvised, persevered. The music had transcended the chaos Logan tried to create as she stepped into the dressing room. Her phone buzzed with notifications. The performance had been live-streamed, and clips of her recovery had already gone viral. One tweet stood out. "When the piano failed, she didn't. That's artistry." But alongside the praise, the familiar wave of skepticism returned. Coincidence or just another publicity stunt? She set the phone down, exhausted. The truth didn't matter to people determined to believe the worst. A knock sounded at the door. Audrey stood, bracing herself for more reporters. But when she opened it, Kimberly Lawson stood there. "Kimberly," Audrey asked, blinking in surprise. "What are you doing here?" Kimberly stepped inside hesitantly, glancing around, dressed in an emerald green evening gown. She clutched a silver clutch tightly. Her expression was conflicted. "I saw what happened tonight," she said softly. "And I saw Logan." Audrey's shoulders stiffened. "Yeah, he was watching. Probably the one who sabotaged the piano." Kimberly nodded. "He did. I overheard him talking to one of his staff earlier. He paid a technician to loosen a few of the strings so the tuning would go off mid-performance." The room seemed to tilt beneath Audrey's feet. She had suspected it, but hearing it confirmed made her stomach lurch. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked warily. Kimberly wrung her hands. "Because I'm done. I can't keep standing by while he destroys people just to feed his ego. I thought marrying Logan would secure my place in this world, but all it's done is show me how rotten it is." Audrey sat down heavily. "And what exactly are you offering me?" Kimberly opened her clutch and handed Audrey a flash drive. "Everything, emails, texts, financial records, proof of the sabotage tonight, and evidence of the smear campaign against you." Audrey hesitated before taking it. "How did you get this?" Kimberly gave a humorless smile. "Logan thinks I'm just another accessory to his empire? He never imagined I'd be smart enough to keep a backup of his emails. But I've been collecting everything for months. I thought I might need leverage someday. But now, I just want to see him face the consequences." Audrey turned the flash drive over in her hand. It felt impossibly light for something that might finally bring Logan Whitmore to his knees. "Why now?" she asked. "Because tonight, I watched him try to break you, just like he does with everyone who challenges him," Kimberly said, her voice trembling. "And you didn't just survive. You turned the whole thing around. You made me realize that fear only gives him more power." Audrey met her gaze and saw the sincerity there. "This could ruin you too," Kimberly shrugged. "Maybe, but it would ruin me more to keep quiet." Audrey stood and extended a hand. Kimberly shook it firmly. "Thank you," Audrey said. "Don't thank me yet. He's going to fight back harder than ever when he realizes what we've done." Audrey pocketed the flash drive and nodded. "Let him." 2 days later, the investigative team from the New York Chronicle published an exposé with the headline, "Behind the Curtain, Logan Whitmore's Campaign of Deception and Sabotage." The article included screenshots of emails in which Logan instructed his PR team to label Audrey as a fraud and fabricate claims of a publicity stunt. Another thread revealed his order to tamper with the Metropolitan Arts Center's piano to discredit her live performance. Kimberly Lawson gave a recorded statement confirming the details. The internet exploded. Whitmore exposed. Trended worldwide. News outlets replayed clips of Audrey's performance alongside transcripts of Logan's emails. Corporate sponsors pulled support from Whitmore Enterprises. Investors demanded his resignation. Audrey sat with Ethan on their couch as the news anchor summarized the fallout. Logan Whitmore has yet to release a statement following the revelations of media manipulation and sabotage. Sources close to the executive report that he has been temporarily removed from his position as CEO while the board investigates. Ethan fist-pumped the air. "We did it," Audrey smiled, but the relief was laced with exhaustion. "Yeah, we did." Her phone buzzed with a message from Scott. "You're unstoppable. Rehearsals start tomorrow." Audrey let her head fall back against the cushion. The storm had passed, but something told her Logan Whitmore wasn't finished yet. Miles away, in a dimly lit penthouse, Logan stared at the television screen. His name crawled across the bottom in red letters. The veins in his temple throbbed. Kimberly had betrayed him. Audrey Reynolds had humiliated him. The empire he'd built through fear was crumbling. He poured himself a drink, his hand shaking, but as the whiskey settled in the glass, a slow smile curved his lips. "Enjoy your victory while it lasts, Audrey," he whispered, "because when I come back, you won't see it coming." Audrey stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the strap of her black satin dress. The fabric hugged her figure with understated elegance. The kind of simplicity Scott insisted made her appear more relatable to the audience. Her reflection stared back, eyes shadowed by the weight of the past few weeks. The public revelation of Logan Whitmore's sabotage had shifted the narrative dramatically. Now, instead of being questioned, she was celebrated. Invitations to interviews flooded her inbox. Magazines called her the resilient virtuoso. Sponsors who once turned their backs now clamored to attach their names to hers. Still, the unease remained. Logan might have been publicly disgraced, but Audrey knew the kind of man he was. His wounded pride would keep him active in the shadows. Ethan appeared at the door, dressed in a crisp button-down shirt that was slightly oversized. His hair was slicked back with more gel than necessary. "You look great," Audrey said, forcing a smile. "So do you. Ready for the gala?" "As ready as I'll ever be." The charity event at the Grand Heights Hotel was intended to raise funds for music programs in underserved schools. It was also Audrey's first official performance since the sabotage incident. The press had been relentless, branding it as the comeback of the piano girl. Scott arrived to pick them up. The car ride was filled with his usual stream of advice. Smile when you walk on stage. Engage with the audience afterward. Keep answers light if reporters ask about Logan. Audrey half listened, her gaze fixed on the passing cityscape. As the car pulled up to the hotel entrance, flashes from photographers illuminated the night. Audrey took a deep breath and stepped out, greeted by a wave of cheers and camera clicks. Ethan followed closely, his face alternating between excitement and nervousness. Inside, the hotel was a symphony of elegance, marble floors, towering floral arrangements, and the gentle murmur of high society conversation. Waiters carried trays of champagne flutes, while a string quartet played softly in the background. Audrey and Ethan mingled for a while before Scott guided her toward the stage. The grand piano gleamed under the soft lights as she approached. Her palms began to sweat. "You've got this," Scott whispered. Audrey nodded, sat at the piano, and closed her eyes for a moment. The hum of anticipation from the crowd buzzed around her. Her fingers pressed the keys, and the first notes drifted through the room. The piece was her own composition, a journey of struggle, defiance, and perseverance. As the melody unfolded, the audience quieted, absorbed in the raw emotion flowing from the instrument. Audrey's anxiety faded with each measure. The piano became an extension of her thoughts. The room, the guests, the cameras. Everything disappeared, leaving only the music. When the final chord resonated, the silence stretched for a heartbeat. Before the room erupted in applause, Audrey stood and bowed, feeling a surge of relief as she came down from the stage. Reporters approached with microphones and raised cell phones. "Audrey, how does it feel to perform again after everything you've been through?" "Incredible," she replied, smiling. "Music is home for me. I'm just grateful to be back where I belong." "Do you think Logan Whitmore will try something again?" Audrey's smile faltered. "I'm focused on my music. People like him don't deserve my attention." More applause, more flashes. Audrey maintained her composure, but the discomfort persisted. Suddenly, in the corner of the hall, a familiar figure appeared. Logan Whitmore. He was there. He should have been hidden, kept away from the public scene. But no, he was wearing an impeccable suit, holding a glass of whiskey in his hand, and a disdainful smile on his face. Audrey froze. Ethan saw him too. "Audrey," Ethan tugged her arm. "What's he doing here?" "Probably to provoke." Logan walked calmly toward her. The reporters noticed and stirred. The atmosphere in the hall changed. Tension spread like electricity in the air. "Good evening, Miss Reynolds," Logan said as he approached. "Stunning performance." Audrey gritted her teeth. "Surprised they let you in." "Money opens many doors," he replied, even after a minor public relations hiccup. "Is that what you call orchestrating a smear campaign and sabotaging my piano?" "A hiccup?" Logan smiled. "You're standing here, aren't you, performing, succeeding. I'd say I did you a favor." The flashes of the cameras intensified. The audience watched in silence, absorbing every word. "Is that why you're here?" Audrey asked, keeping her voice firm. "To take credit for my success." "Just to remind you," Logan said, leaning slightly so that only she could hear, "that no matter how high you climb, I can still pull the strings." Audrey felt her anger boil, but she remained calm. "Funny," she replied, also lowering her voice. "I thought marionettes needed strings to be controlled. I cut mine a long time ago." His expression tightened. For a second, Logan seemed to lose control, but he soon recovered his mask of indifference. "Enjoy it while it lasts, sweetheart," he said, turning to leave. "Wait." Logan stopped. He turned around slowly. Audrey approached the microphone at the center of the hall. The audience watched, absorbed in the tension of the moment. She took a deep breath. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice clear. "Tonight was supposed to be just about music, but sometimes life presents an opportunity too important to ignore." She pointed to Logan. "This man tried to destroy me. He spread lies, sabotaged my performances, and underestimated the power of truth." Logan laughed quietly, shaking his head. "Mr. Whitmore likes to believe he controls narratives," Audrey continued. "But he forgot one thing. Music doesn't bend to power. Music speaks directly to the heart." She looked at the piano. "So tonight, I'll play one more piece. No tricks, no distortions, just the truth." Audrey returned to the piano. Her hands rested on the keys and she began to play an original composition. The theme was clear, a conflict between oppression and freedom. The audience felt every note, every intentional pause. Logan, standing at the back, pursed his lips. When the final chord sounded, the hall exploded in applause. Audrey stood, went to the microphone and said, "Thank you. And to those who try to silence us, just know, the music always finds a way." Logan left before the applause ended, and Audrey knew that the fight was far from over. The morning after the charity gala, Audrey woke to a phone buzzing incessantly on her nightstand. Sunlight streamed through the half-closed blinds, painting pale gold stripes across the wall. Her head pounded from exhaustion, her body still recovering from the emotional whiplash of the night before. She grabbed her phone without opening her eyes and answered. "Hello. Audrey, it's Scott," came the familiar voice. "Have you seen the news?" Her eyes snapped open. "No, what happened?" "Check any social platform, you're everywhere." Audrey sat up, heart pounding, and opened a news app. The first headline hit her like a cold splash of water. Audrey Reynolds confronts Logan Whitmore in unforgettable gala performance. Music triumphs over manipulation. She scrolled further. Videos of her final speech and performance flooded the internet. Comments poured in, mostly supportive. Audrey's courage is unmatched. She didn't just play music, she told a story. Logan Whitmore messed with the wrong person. Her thumb hovered over one video. The thumbnail captured her standing at the microphone with Logan's shadow visible in the background. She tapped it. The clip played, her voice resonating with calm defiance as she pointed toward Logan and declared, "Music doesn't bend to power." The video cut to Logan's reaction. A flicker of surprise before his face hardened into a mask of disdain. The internet had dissected that moment endlessly. People speculated about his next move. "Scott," she said, voice shaky. "What happens now?" "Now," he laughed softly. "Now you're officially not just a musician. You're a symbol." Audrey rubbed her temple. "A symbol of what? Resilience? Courage? People love a David versus Goliath story and you just gave them one live on stage." He paused. "You should know. There are already calls for interviews. National ones. Good Morning America. The Today Show. Even 60 Minutes. Everyone wants to hear your side of the story." Audrey's heart clenched. "I just wanted to play music, not be a headline." "You can't separate the two anymore," Scott said. "But if you play this right, you can control the narrative. Own it." Audrey hung up and sat in silence. Her mind drifted back to Logan's face at the gala, the way his smile faltered when she called him out. He hadn't expected her to fight back. A knock sounded at the door. Ethan's voice followed. "Audrey, you okay?" She opened the door, and he stepped in with a grin. "You're trending again." "Yeah, so I heard." She sat on the edge of the bed. "I don't know if I'm ready for this." "You're more ready than you think," Ethan said, sitting beside her. "Besides, Mom always said the truth eventually wins." "Right." Audrey smiled faintly. Their mother's words echoed like a familiar melody. The truth, like music, finds its way through the noise. By midday, reporters gathered outside their apartment building. Audrey drew the blinds and avoided the windows, but Ethan peeked through the slats. "They look like vultures," he muttered. She paced the living room. "Logan won't let this go. He'll try something else." "Yeah, but now everyone's watching," Ethan said. "He can't move in the shadows anymore." The thought comforted her briefly. Later that afternoon, Audrey received a notification, an anonymous email with no subject line. Against her better judgment, she opened it. "Miss Reynolds, you may have won the public for now, but you have no idea how deep this game goes. I don't lose, I'll W." Audrey's pulse spiked. She stared at the screen, bile rising in her throat. She forwarded the message to Scott. His response was immediate. "We'll notify the authorities. Don't engage." Audrey tried to breathe through the fear, but the familiar chill of helplessness returned. Logan might be exposed, but he still held influence, and she knew him well enough to realize he wouldn't simply retreat. The following morning, she prepared for her first televised interview. The studio buzzed with activity as makeup artists dabbed her face and producers reviewed questions. Ethan sat beside her, giving a thumbs up. When the cameras rolled, the interviewer, Dana Collins, smiled warmly. "Audrey, your story has captivated the nation. A waitress turned overnight sensation, who stood up to one of the most powerful businessmen in the country. How does that feel?" Audrey adjusted the mic clip to her blouse. "Surreal," she said honestly. "I've loved music my whole life, but I never imagined it would bring me here." Dana nodded. "And what about Logan Whitmore? Your confrontation at the gala was unforgettable. Were you afraid to call him out like that?" Audrey hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Of course I was afraid. Logan Whitmore has resources and connections most people can't imagine. But fear doesn't get to dictate my life." Dana leaned forward. "Do you believe he's finished trying to sabotage you?" "No," Audrey said. "People like him don't stop until they feel like they've won. But I'm not backing down." The interview aired live. Social media exploded with praise for her candor. But that night, as Audrey sat on the balcony, her phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. "If you think the truth will save you, you're mistaken. I'm always one step ahead. Old W." Audrey clenched her fists. She refused to let fear dictate her actions. She called Scott. "I want to go bigger," she said when he picked up. "Bigger how?" "A live concert, huge venue, broadcast worldwide. I want everyone watching. If he tries something again, the world will see it." Scott was silent for a moment. "You're playing with fire. Then let's make sure the flames burn bright." 3 weeks later, the announcement shook the music world. Audrey Reynolds to perform live at Madison Square Garden. A concert for truth. The tickets sold out in hours. The night before the concert, Ethan came into her room. "You nervous?" "Terrified," Audrey admitted. He sat beside her. "Mom would be proud." Audrey smiled. "Yeah, she would." The next day, she walked into the arena and saw the grand piano on stage, bathed in lights, thousands of seats stretched into the shadows. She placed her fingers on the keys and played a soft melody, the sound carrying through the empty space. Her phone vibrated on the piano bench, another anonymous message. "Tomorrow, the world sees who you really are." You. Audrey's heart skipped. Logan was planning something again, but this time, she was ready. She sat at the piano and played louder, letting the music drown out the fear. The day of the Madison Square Garden concert arrived with a thick, restless tension hanging in the air. Audrey stood at the window of her hotel suite, gazing out at the city below. The streets teemed with life. Cars honking, pedestrians rushing, and electronic billboards flashing her name alongside the words, "A concert for truth." Her reflection stared back at her in the glass, and she barely recognized the woman looking at her. Gone was the invisible waitress who spent nights scrubbing tables and dreaming of music. In her place stood someone the world now saw as a symbol of defiance. But beneath the public image, she still carried the same weight: fear of failure, of disappointing her family, of falling into the traps Logan Whitmore had set. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "It's open," she called. Ethan walked in, his tie slightly askew, hair carefully styled. He flopped into the armchair by the window. "The crowd's insane out there," he said. "People with signs, shirts with your name, even someone dressed as a giant piano." Audrey chuckled despite her nerves. "A giant piano?" "Yeah, they called themselves the Piano Girl Fan Club. You've officially made it." Her smile faded. "Yeah, made it into Logan's crosshairs." Ethan's face hardened. "He's a coward. The only power he has is fear. You showed everyone that already. I wish I believed it was that simple." He stood, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You're stronger than he is, Aud. Always have been." She squeezed his hand in silent thanks. The hours ticked by in a blur of final preparations. Sound checks, lighting adjustments, security sweeps. Scott hovered nearby, barking orders into his headset by 6 p.m. The arena hummed with anticipation. The seats filled with thousands of fans. Online streams promised millions more would watch from around the world. Backstage, Audrey paced. Her gown, a deep crimson, swirled around her legs. The dress had been chosen with care. Bold, confident, unyielding. Scott approached. "Tech team triple-checked the piano. Everything's secure. No tampering this time." "Thanks. Security's watching for Whitmore. If he tries anything, we'll know." Audrey nodded but didn't feel reassured. Logan didn't need to be physically present to cause chaos. He thrived on manipulation and doubt. The clock hit 7:59. The stage manager gave her the signal. "Showtime," Scott whispered. Audrey swallowed hard, adjusted her earpiece, and walked to the edge of the stage. The lights dimmed, the audience quieted. A single spotlight illuminated the piano. Audrey stepped into the beam and sat down, the weight of the moment pressed against her chest. She closed her eyes, let her fingers rest on the keys, and inhaled deeply. The first note sang through the arena, resonating like a declaration. The melody that followed was one she had composed the night after her confrontation with Logan, a piece that captured fear, anger, resilience, and, finally, triumph. The audience leaned into the music. The tension dissolved as the sound carried them into Audrey's world, until the screens flickered. The enormous LED panels flanking the stage crackled with static. The music faltered as the screens went black, then flashed with unfamiliar images. Audrey's heart dropped. A grainy video appeared. It showed her at the Whitmore-Lawson wedding, sitting at the piano. But this version had been altered. The audio was distorted to make her performance sound mechanical, robotic. Text flashed across the screen. "The truth behind the lie." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The music faltered as the manipulated footage continued. Spliced clips made it seem as though Scott Harrington had orchestrated the entire event as a publicity stunt. A voiceover played, "Audrey Reynolds, manufactured prodigy, the piano girl hoax exposed." Audrey froze, her hands stiff on the keys. Her eyes darted toward the side stage. Scott stood there, frantically speaking into his headset. Security guards scrambled around the tech booth. The audience's energy shifted, from awe to confusion. Her phone, sitting beside the piano, buzzed with a notification. Against her better judgment, she glanced at the screen. Unknown number, enjoying the show. W. Audrey's pulse roared in her ears. Logan had done it again. He'd hijacked the biggest night of her career, planting seeds of doubt at the exact moment when she was most vulnerable. Panic threatened to paralyze her. The audience murmurs grew louder, and then she remembered her father's words. "When the world tries to drown you out, play louder." She closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and slammed her fingers into the keys. The sound was jarring, discordant. The audience fell silent. She shifted to a minor progression, building a new melody on the dissonance Logan had introduced. The piece morphed into something raw, primal, an expression of betrayal and anger transformed into resilience. The distorted footage played on the screens, but the music grew louder, overpowering the lies. The audience responded. Some began clapping in rhythm. Others raised their phones to record this moment of defiance. The music built to a crescendo. Audrey poured every ounce of her fury and strength into the final chords. The last note hung in the air, vibrating through the arena. Silence followed. Then applause erupted. It surged like a tidal wave, drowning out every trace of Logan's manipulation. Audrey stood, tears threatening to spill, and walked to the microphone. "Music," she said, voice trembling but resolute. "Doesn't lie, people do, but tonight, you heard the truth," the audience roared. Backstage, Scott was already coordinating with cybersecurity experts. "We'll trace the hack," he said when Audrey joined him. "Good," she said, "but it won't stop here. Logan won't quit." Scott nodded grimly. "Then we'll be ready." Hours later, Audrey sat on her hotel bed, scrolling through reactions online. The video of her recovery had gone viral, but amid the support, doubt still festered. Another message arrived. "Unknown number. Nice improvisation. But you can't outplay me." Audrey's jaw tightened. She opened the window and let the cold air hit her face. The battle wasn't over, but Logan had underestimated her resilience once. He wouldn't get the chance again. Audrey sat on the couch in her hotel suite, the phone in her hands trembling slightly. The message from Logan Whitmore remained on the screen. "Nice improvisation, but you can't outplay me." Outside, the city lights glittered like fragments of shattered glass. Oblivious to the private war unfolding in the digital shadows, Ethan sat beside her, eyes locked on the screen. "He's obsessed," Ethan said, voice tight with anger. "Why can't he just move on?" "Because control isn't just a habit for him," Audrey said softly. "It's his identity. If he can't control me, he feels like he's losing control of everything." Her phone buzzed again. Another message. "Unknown number. You've always been a pawn, Audrey. The audience loves a good story. I gave you one. You're welcome." Audrey tightened her grip on the phone until her knuckles turned white. "This ends now," she said through clenched teeth. Ethan's eyes widened. "What are you thinking?" She stood abruptly and dialed Scott. He answered on the first ring. "Audrey, you okay?" "No," she said, pacing the carpet. "Logan just texted me again. He's taunting me. We need to go public with everything we have." Scott hesitated. "We've already exposed his tactics. What more can we do?" "Make it personal," Audrey said. "He's tried to destroy me with public perception. Let's show people who he really is behind the polished PR image." There was a pause. "That's risky if it backfires." "It won't," she interrupted. "He thrives in the shadows. Let's drag him into the light." Scott exhaled. "Okay, we'll set up a live stream tomorrow morning." Audrey ended the call and turned to Ethan. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we fight back. She barely slept that night. Memories of Logan's calculated cruelty looped through her mind. His smug expression at the wedding, his contemptuous words at the gala, the hacked screens at Madison Square Garden. The piano keys still vibrated beneath her fingertips in ghostly echoes. By sunrise, she was at the studio Scott had rented for the live stream. The crew adjusted cameras and microphones as Scott reviewed the script they had prepared. Just speak from the heart, he advised. People already support you. Now they need to understand the stakes. Audrey nodded, her stomach twisted with nerves as the countdown began. 3, 2, 1. The red light on the camera blinked on. Good morning, Audrey began, clasping her hands together. My name is Audrey Reynolds, and for the past few months, I've been living a nightmare orchestrated by Logan Whitmore. The live chat exploded instantly. Thousands of viewers flooded the stream within minutes. When I first played piano at the Whitmore-Lawson wedding, I thought it was just a moment, an unexpected opportunity to share music. I didn't know that Logan Whitmore, humiliated that a nobody stole the spotlight, would dedicate himself to ruining my life. She inhaled deeply. He spread lies, manipulated the media, and even sabotaged my performance at Madison Square Garden. I have the proof. Scott cued the visuals. Screenshots of Logan's emails, the altered footage, and the hacked messages appeared beside her on the screen. This isn't just about me, Audrey continued. It's about the kind of power we allow people like Logan Whitmore to wield. He believes money and influence give him the right to destroy anyone who challenges his narrative. But music can't be controlled, and neither can the truth. She locked eyes with the camera. So, Logan, if you're watching this, and I know you are, here's my message. I'm not afraid of you. I never was. And no matter what you try next, you won't win. The live stream ended. Scott let out a shaky laugh. Well, that was powerful. Audrey leaned against the table, muscles tight. Now we wait. The backlash came swiftly. The internet dissected every second of her video. Support flooded in from musicians, activists, and public figures condemning Logan's behavior. But Logan didn't stay silent for long. That evening, a statement appeared on his social media. Miss Reynolds is an emotionally unstable woman exploiting a fabricated rivalry for fame. I have always supported artistic talent, but this is a clear attempt to tarnish my reputation with baseless accusations. The statement was accompanied by a video of him sitting in a leather chair, dressed impeccably as always. His tone was calm, measured, reasonable. Audrey's stomach turned as she watched. He was masterful, twisting facts with surgical precision. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. You're in my game now. Let's see how well you play. Audrey threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall with a dull thud and fell to the carpet. Ethan retrieved it, eyes wide. We need help, Ethan said. This is bigger than us. Audrey slumped onto the couch. He was right. Logan's influence ran too deep. Scott arrived within the hour. I made some calls, he said. There's a cybersecurity expert who specializes in high-profile harassment cases. Her name's Olivia Cross. She's agreed to meet with us tomorrow. Audrey nodded, hope sparking faintly through the exhaustion. The next day, Olivia Cross entered the studio. She was in her mid-30s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She sat across from Audrey and opened her laptop. I've reviewed the files Scott sent me, Olivia began. Logan Whitmore is meticulous. He uses burner accounts, proxies, and third-party contractors to do his dirty work. But he made one mistake. Audrey leaned forward. What mistake? He used the same digital fingerprint for the Madison Square Garden sabotage that he used to send you the anonymous messages. Olivia's lips curved into a smile. We've got him. Audrey's heart raced. So what do we do? Olivia's eyes gleamed. We turn his own game against him. Over the next 48 hours, Olivia traced Logan's network and compiled a report detailing his manipulation. Audrey recorded a new message, but this time, they planned the release with surgical precision. They scheduled the post for prime time. The moment it went live, the internet exploded with the evidence Olivia had uncovered. Emails, payment records, chat logs, everything connected to Logan Whitmore. And then came the twist. Audrey ended the video with the reveal of Logan's personal messages to her. The veiled threats, the taunts, The arrogance. Social media erupted. Whitmore, unmasked, trended globally. News outlets dissected the revelations. Within hours, Whitmore Enterprises' stock plummeted. The board announced an emergency meeting. Audrey sat in front of the television, heart pounding as a reporter spoke. In a unanimous decision, the board of Whitmore Enterprises has voted to permanently remove Logan Whitmore as CEO, citing evidence of unethical practices and harassment. Ethan whooped, pumping his fist. Scott clapped Audrey on the back. She smiled faintly. Relief washed over her. But beneath it, the uneasy knowledge that Logan wouldn't accept defeat so easily. As if to confirm her fears, her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. "You think you've won? I'm just getting started. I love you." Audrey tightened her grip on the phone and whispered, "Let's see how well you play when the spotlight turns on you." The war wasn't over, but neither was she. Audrey sat at the kitchen table with a steaming cup of coffee cradled between her hands. The warm ceramic did little to soothe the cold dread settling in her chest. The message from Logan Whitmore lingered in her mind like a shadow that refused to dissolve. "You think you've won? I'm just getting started." Across the table, Ethan was hunched over his laptop, scrolling through news articles. The world had turned on Logan with a swiftness that surprised even Audrey. His pristine image as a business magnate was in ruins. Late-night comedians mocked his arrogance. Journalists dissected his manipulative tactics. And former employees came forward with new accusations of bullying and corporate sabotage. Yet Audrey knew Logan too well to believe he would simply fade into obscurity. "Anything new?" she asked, breaking the silence. Ethan shook his head. "Just more fallout for Whitmore Enterprises. Their stock's still crashing. The board issued a statement about restructuring to restore public trust." He snorted. "Good luck with that." Audrey stared into her coffee. "Logan won't go down quietly. He never does." Ethan's fingers tapped anxiously against the laptop. "Yeah, and that text? It wasn't just empty bravado. He's planning something." Her phone buzzed on the table. Both siblings jumped. Audrey grabbed it and checked the screen. "Scott." "Hey, Scott." "Audrey, we've got a situation," Scott said, voice tense. "Someone hacked into the event system for your next concert. They replaced all the promotional materials online with the words, 'The final performance.'" Audrey's stomach dropped. "That sounds like him." "It gets worse," Scott continued. Olivia traced the IP address. It's bouncing through multiple servers, but she says the pattern matches the one Logan used during the Madison Square Garden sabotage. "So he's escalating," she said, gripping the phone tightly. "Yeah, Olivia's doubling the cybersecurity protocols, but she thinks he might try something bigger this time." Audrey exchanged a worried glance with Ethan. "Bigger how?" "She doesn't know yet, but she suggested we cancel the concert." "No," Audrey said immediately. "Audrey, no," she repeated, voice firm. "That's exactly what he wants. He wants me scared, running, and silent. We're not canceling anything." Scott sighed. "Okay, but we need a plan." Audrey disconnected the call and turned to Ethan. "We need to stay ahead of him this time." Ethan rubbed his temples. "Logan thinks he's always one step ahead, right?" "Yeah. So what if we let him think he is? While we set a trap?" Audrey's brows knit together. "Go on. What if we make him believe his plan is working? We let him think he's sabotaging the next concert. But we control the narrative. We let him step into the light and catch him red-handed." Audrey's heart quickened. "That could work, but it has to be airtight. Olivia can help us," Ethan said, already opening a chat window on his laptop. "We feed him breadcrumbs, let him follow them, and when he goes for the final blow, we expose everything." Audrey nodded. "Let's do it." The following week, preparations for the concert intensified. The venue, Crescent Hall, was smaller than Madison Square Garden, but known for its acoustics and intimate atmosphere. The event was marketed as the Piano Girls' Homecoming, a return to the simplicity of pure music after months of public battles. Meanwhile, Olivia crafted a digital honey trap. She created a fake email thread between Audrey and Scott, discussing vulnerabilities in the venue's security system. The emails suggested that a specific control panel backstage, labeled Panel 3C, was responsible for the concert's entire lighting and sound configuration. "Logan's hackers won't be able to resist this," Olivia said, eyes gleaming with determination as she monitored the activity from her laptop. "We're giving them exactly what they want, an easy target." The night before the concert, Olivia's screen flashed with an alert. "We've got a hit," she announced. Someone accessed the dummy system. And guess who? Audrey leaned over her shoulder. The IP address matched Logan's digital fingerprint. "He took the bait," Olivia confirmed. "He thinks panel 3C is his ticket to sabotaging the concert." Audrey's stomach twisted. "What exactly can he do if he messes with it?" "Nothing," Olivia said with a tight smile. "The panel controls a single spotlight on the left side of the stage, but Logan won't know that until it's too late." The team coordinated with law enforcement, who installed discreet surveillance equipment around the venue. Detectives planned to monitor all backstage activity, ready to move the moment someone tampered with the system. The night of the concert arrived, and the atmosphere crackled with anticipation. Fans filled the hall, eager to witness what many speculated could be the culmination of Audrey's battle with Logan Whitmore. Backstage, Audrey paced. Her crimson gown shimmered with each step. Ethan adjusted his tie nervously. "You sure about this?" he asked. "No," she admitted, "but it's the only way to end it." The lights dimmed. The stage manager gave the signal. Audrey walked out, the polished hardwood stage cool beneath her heels. The audience erupted in applause, then quieted as she settled at the piano. Her fingers hovered over the keys. The first note resonated, a deep, rich sound that anchored her to the moment. She let the music carry her, pouring her emotions into every measure, minutes into the performance. She saw it, a faint flicker in the left side spotlight. Panel 3C. Logan had made his move. Audrey glanced toward the wings. A shadowy figure stood near the panel, partially obscured by the curtain. Her pulse quickened. The music swelled toward the crescendo. Suddenly, the spotlight on the left side blinked erratically. The audience murmured in confusion. Audrey played through it, her melody shifting to a more dissonant tone as if incorporating the disruption into the performance. The figure at the panel moved. Then, from the side entrance, 2 police officers surged forward. "Step away from the panel," one of them barked. The figure turned. Logan Whitmore's face was partially hidden by a baseball cap, but his trademark sneer was unmistakable. The officers grabbed his arms and pinned him against the wall. The audience gasped as the commotion became visible through the side stage curtain. Audrey kept playing, her heart racing, her music rising to match the chaos unfolding. The officers handcuffed Logan and escorted him across the stage. As he passed the piano, his eyes locked with Audrey's. His lips curled into a snarl. "You haven't won," he hissed. Audrey met his gaze with steady resolve. "I already have," she whispered. The officers dragged him away. The audience, realizing what had just happened, erupted into a standing ovation. Audrey let the final chord resonate through the hall, then stood and bowed. Tears burned her eyes as she looked toward the empty space where Logan had stood. The nightmare was finally over. As she left the stage, Ethan met her with an ecstatic grin. "You did it." "No," she said, voice trembling with relief. "We did it." Outside, reporters swarmed the police cruiser as Logan was shoved into the back seat. The headlines were immediate. "Piano girl outsmarts corporate villain. Logan Whitmore caught in act of sabotage." Audrey watched the coverage from the dressing room, the tension in her chest finally loosening. Scott knocked on the door. "How do you feel?" "Like I can breathe again," she said. Scott smiled. "Get some rest, tomorrow. We make music without distractions." Audrey sank into the chair, exhaustion washing over her. The battle was over, and the music, at last, could play without fear. The morning sunlight filtered through the thin curtains of Audrey's hotel room, casting warm streaks across the carpet. She lay still, eyes half open, the events of the previous night replaying in her mind like a dream that teetered on the edge of disbelief. The music, the malfunctioning spotlight, the collective gasp of the audience when the police officers burst onto the stage, and then Logan's face, twisted with rage as the cuffs snapped around his wrists. Audrey sat up, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. The adrenaline that had carried her through the night had evaporated, leaving behind a strange emptiness. The war was over, but her body hadn't realized it yet. A knock at the door jolted her from her thoughts. "It's me," came Ethan's voice. She opened the door. Ethan stepped inside, holding 2 coffees and his phone in his other hand. His face was alight with the kind of nervous energy that only viral headlines could ignite. "You're not gonna believe this," he said, handing her a cup. "What now?" He held up his phone. Look. Audrey's eyes focused on the screen. A news broadcast played. Good morning, New York. In an unprecedented turn of events, disgraced businessman Logan Whitmore was arrested last night during musician Audrey Reynolds' live concert. Witnesses report that Whitmore was caught sabotaging the venue's lighting and sound system. Police officials confirmed that Whitmore will face charges including cyber harassment, stalking, and malicious destruction of property. The broadcast cut to grainy footage of Logan being escorted out of Crescent Hall. He struggled against the officers, his voice audible. This isn't over. She's nothing without me. Audrey shivered. The voice, so familiar from his taunts, was now raw with desperation. He's completely unraveled, Ethan said, shaking his head. Public opinion has flipped hard. Even his former allies are distancing themselves. Audrey exhaled slowly. So it's really over. Ethan gave a cautious nod. Yeah, I think it is. She took a sip of coffee, letting the warmth soothe her, but the relief felt muted. Victory came with a strange hollowness. Her phone buzzed with a notification. Scott's name appeared. Morning, Scott, she answered. Audrey, congrats again. The whole city's talking about last night. You should see the front page of the Times. Let me guess. Piano Girl strikes back. Close, it says. Music triumphs over malice. Audrey Reynolds' stand against fear. Pretty poetic, huh? Audrey smiled faintly. It does have a nice ring to it. Anyway, Scott continued, I wanted to let you know that you've been invited to perform at the Harmony Festival in Los Angeles. It's the biggest classical music event on the West Coast. Wow, that's huge. They want you to headline, Scott added. The festival's theme is the voice of truth. Fitting, right? Audrey hesitated. When is it? 2 months from now. It's perfect timing. You'll have space to breathe. She bit her lip. The idea of stepping onto another major stage so soon stirred a new wave of anxiety. But this was what she'd fought for, the chance to play without fear. Okay, she said. Let's do it. Scott's enthusiasm came through the phone. Awesome. I'll handle the details. Enjoy your day. You've earned it. Audrey hung up and looked at Ethan. Harmony Festival, L.A., headliner. His eyes widened. That's incredible. Mom would be so proud. The mention of their mother sent a pang through Audrey's chest. Yeah, she said softly. She would. The next weeks passed in a whirlwind. The footage of Logan's arrest continued to dominate social media, while Audrey's performance became a symbol of resilience against abuse of power. Interviews, talk shows, magazine covers, all wanted to hear her story. But what she cherished most were the messages from aspiring musicians. One email stood out. Dear Audrey, I watched your performance at Crescent Hall and cried. I've always loved music, but was afraid to share my voice. You showed me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's playing through it. Thank you for giving me hope. Audrey printed that message and pinned it above her piano. Ethan helped her pack for Los Angeles. The flight was long and the time change disorienting, but the city's energy was contagious. The Harmony Festival Committee welcomed her with open arms, providing a suite overlooking the Hollywood Hills. The day of the festival, Audrey woke before dawn. She sat at the hotel piano, practicing scales until her muscles remembered their purpose. That night, the festival hall brimmed with excitement. Musicians from across the globe filled the seats, along with journalists and celebrities eager to witness the Piano Girl's next chapter. Backstage, Scott checked the final preparations. Security's tight, he assured her. No surprises this time. Audrey nodded, adjusting the sleek, pearl-colored dress she wore. Thanks, Scott. I trust you, the stage manager signaled. Showtime. Audrey walked onto the stage to a standing ovation. The grand piano waited beneath the spotlight, polished and expectant. She sat, placed her hands on the keys, and began to play. The first note resonated with clarity, like the chime of a bell. The piece she'd chosen was one she wrote in the aftermath of Logan's arrest, a composition about reclaiming one's voice. The melody flowed through her fingers, weaving a tapestry of defiance, pain, and triumph. The audience was silent, enraptured. When the final chord faded, the hall erupted. People stood, clapped, cheered. Audrey rose, bowed, and let the applause wash over her as she stepped off the stage. Ethan hugged her tightly. You did it, he whispered, She smiled. Yeah, I did. Back at the hotel, exhaustion pulled at her bones. She peeled off her dress, pulled on comfortable sweats, and collapsed onto the bed. Her phone buzzed. Scott had texted, "Incredible performance. You made magic tonight." She was about to reply when another notification appeared. An unknown number. Her breath caught. The message read, "Did you miss me?" Audrey sat up so quickly that her heart slammed against her ribs. Her hands trembled as she stared at the screen. The sender's ID traced back to a blocked number. Her phone rang. The same unknown number. She answered with a whisper. "Who is this?" Static crackled. Then a familiar voice, smooth, cold. "Did you think it was over, Audrey?" Logan Whitmore. Her mouth went dry. "You're supposed to be in custody." A low chuckle. "You underestimated me. I always have an exit strategy." Her vision blurred with fear. "What do you want?" "The same thing I've always wanted," Logan said softly. "To remind you who's really in control." The line went dead. Audrey's hands shook. She dialed Scott. "Logan called me," she said, voice brittle. "That's impossible. He was denied bail." "Then explain how he just spoke to me." A knock at the hotel door made her jump. "Ethan," she called, heart racing. No response. Another knock. Louder this time. Audrey's phone slipped from her grasp as she backed away from the door. The knock came again. Slow, deliberate, and then a voice, muffled but unmistakable. "Music doesn't lie, Audrey, but you did." Audrey's scream caught in her throat as the shadow beneath the door shifted. Audrey stood frozen in the center of the hotel room, her pulse pounding in her ears. The shadow beneath the door shifted again. The voice, Logan's voice, had been unmistakable. Her eyes darted toward her phone, lying face down on the carpet where she'd dropped it. Slowly, she moved toward it. Another knock. This time, more insistent. "Audrey," came the voice from the other side. "Open the door. Let's talk." Her hand closed around the phone. She hit the emergency call button. 911, what's your emergency?" "Someone's at my door," she whispered. "He shouldn't be here, Logan Whitmore. He's supposed to be in custody." "Stay on the line, ma'am. Officers are en route." The knock turned into pounding. Audrey backed away from the door, eyes locked on the gap beneath it. "Audrey," Logan's voice cracked with frustration. "You're ruining everything. Open the damn door." She retreated to the bathroom and locked the door. The dispatcher kept talking, but the words blurred in her panic. The pounding grew louder, then silence. Her breath caught. She strained to hear beyond the bathroom walls. "Nothing," the dispatcher said. "Ma'am, officers are arriving now. Stay on the line." A sudden crash shattered the silence. Glass exploded from the window in the main room. Audrey stifled a scream, pressing herself against the cold tile. "He's coming in through the window," she gasped. "Stay hidden." "Ma'am, officers are seconds away." Footsteps crunched on broken glass. Logan's voice echoed through the suite. "You should have stayed quiet, Audrey." The bathroom door handle jiggled. Audrey's vision blurred with terror. Then came a different sound. Shouts from the hallway. "Police! Step away from the door." The handle stopped moving. The footsteps receded. A scuffle followed. Thuds, grunts, the crackle of a taser. Then silence. Minutes later, a voice called out, "Ma'am, this is Officer Daniels with LAPD. You can come out now." Audrey unlocked the door with trembling hands. The living room was a mess. Shattered window, toppled lamp, glass crunching underfoot. And there, on the carpet, lay Logan Whitmore, handcuffed and unconscious. His face was twisted in a snarl even in sleep. "You're safe now," the officer assured her. Audrey nodded, but the fear still coiled tight in her chest. The next morning, the news confirmed that Logan Whitmore had bribed a prison guard to escape custody. His intention, to sabotage Audrey's performance and confront her personally, the footage of his capture spread like wildfire. The headlines declared, "Piano girl stalked by fallen tycoon, Logan Whitmore's obsession ends in arrest." Audrey sat on the couch, Ethan beside her. The news anchor's voice filled the room. Experts say Whitmore's fixation with Reynolds became pathological after her unexpected success at his wedding. Psychologists cite a classic case of a narcissistic personality unraveling when confronted with loss of control. Audrey turned the TV off. "So?" Ethan said. voice soft. He's finally done. She wanted to believe that. She really did. Later that afternoon, Scott called. "Audrey, how are you holding up?" "I don't even know," she admitted. "Listen," he said gently. "The festival organizers want to offer you a second performance, a chance to reclaim the night on your own terms." She hesitated. The thought of stepping on stage again made her stomach churn. "Scott, I don't know if I can." "You can," he said. "And you should. End this nightmare with your music, not with fear." She closed her eyes. The truth sat there, waiting to be acknowledged. Logan had stolen so much from her already. If she backed down now, he would win, even behind bars. "Okay," she said. "Let's do it." The following weekend, the concert hall was filled to capacity. Security officers patrolled every entrance. The audience was electric with anticipation. Audrey stood backstage, hands trembling. Ethan appeared at her side, giving her shoulder a squeeze. "You got this, sis." She took a shaky breath. "Yeah," the stage manager signaled. The lights dimmed. The audience hushed. Audrey stepped into the spotlight and sat at the piano. Her fingers hovered over the keys. The memories surged. Logan's voice, the fear, the relentless doubt. She closed her eyes and let the first chord ring out. The melody unfolded. Raw and unfiltered, she played not just for herself, but for every person who'd ever been silenced. The music swelled with defiance and grace, carrying the weight of her survival. The final note hung in the air like a breath held too long. Silence. Then the audience erupted. Audrey stood and bowed. Tears blurred the faces in the crowd, but the sound of their applause was clear. It was the sound of freedom. Backstage, Scott met her with a proud smile. "You did it," he said. "No," Audrey corrected, voice steady for the first time in months. "I ended it, and somewhere far away, behind cold steel bars." Logan Whitmore sat alone in silence, a man who had tried to orchestrate fear, but had been outplayed by the resilience of music.